So I've finally got Elements 11 and I'm going to give a run through of the actions as they run in Elements. Now, I haven't used Elements very much, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm a bit slow in finding tools and things. So I have the actions here. These are the post-processing actions and they're all loaded individually. So I'm going to start off with the 70s look and I'm going to run that. And you can see what that does. It has, let me just turn all the layers off apart from this one is a vintage layer. Now this can be, that's an opacity of 50%, but you can change the opacity. There's a brighten layer, a cooling layer. This is a blue color fill layer, but you can double click on the thumbnail layer and move it around depending on what you want for your image. Well, let's leave it at blue. And then we also have a sunshine layer on the very top here, and this is a multiply layer. It's got quite a high opacity, so you can lower that down depending on what you want. So that's the 70s look. Then we're going to move on to dawn. I'm going to run that, and this brings red tones to your picture, and we've got two color fill layers on this as well. So again, you can click in there and change the color of those, and because they're all masked, we can click on the mask, and if we want to just take some of this color off just one part of the image, we can go on the mask, and we're going to use black paint because black will hide the effect. We have it at 100%. The paintbrush is on normal mode, and we can make the brush bigger and we can just paint on there. So let me show you a little bit. So you can see if I raise the opacity of that, you can see that it's not affecting that. You might be able to take it off here or whatever you want. And if you want to bring it back in, again, you can just click on the layer and paint back over with white, or just fill the whole mask in with white. And you can lower and raise the opacity of any of these layers. So that's dawn, and the next we're going to move on to earth. Let me just get rid of the adjustments that are already on that one. So we have earth here, and this is quite a dramatic action. You can see it's very contrasty, so again, that's at 100% opacity, that contrast layer, but you can raise or lower that. It gives muted tones. Again, you can raise or lower that. And a pop, and also a color fill layer, which of course can be changed as well. Next we move on to makeup, and I'm going to run it on the same image here, so I'm going to delete those layers, click on makeup, and again this is quite a dramatic action. It has a watercolor layer which can sometimes take a little while to run depending on the RAM of your computer, and so you can see it gives quite a soft look to that, almost blurred, kind of glowy. We have the contrast in there, a warm filter, and if it makes your image too dark, you can always make new levels and just raise it up if you want. So that's the makeup action. Next we're going to go into mocha, and let's see what's a good picture for this mocha. Okay, so we're going to go on to I'll just zoom out from this. So the mocha is good. It's quite good for newborn images if you want them to look really warm and cozy. So I'm going to run the mocha, and you can see how that has made the skin look much warmer. This has a built-in sharpen layer, and I suppose that's why it's especially good for newborns, because you can just get your paintbrush with a white, get white 100% opacity with white paint, and you can paint on the details, and that just sharpens up the details of little sections of it. So you're clicking on the mask of that layer to make that work. So this is the warm and muted layer, and this is the mocha gradient. So we can click on the mocha gradient, and it's a radial gradient, which means that we can change the angle to suit where we want the darkest color to start, So you can see as you roll it around how it changes the image slightly. And this of course can be, you can change the opacity of this. So next we're going to move on to Peachy, and I'm going to use this image here. Let me just delete them first so you can see. So we're going to go on to Peachy here, and that really warms things up. We have our Peachy layer here which we can change. We have a brighten layer and haze and another warm color there. So these are all different opacities, so you can change the opacity of these, and you can also paint on the mask. So if you don't want one area to be so bright with this brighten layer, then you can just get black paintbrush and paint over those. So you control that. So then we're going to go on to Pink Mist, and I'm going to run Pink Mist, and you'll see what this does. It softens everything out first, so we have layers of pink. So this is especially nice for baby girls. So you can see that dulls some of the highlights with that browns. We have soft pink. I'll raise the opacity of that one a little bit, and then I have a pink gradient. So you can see you can reverse the gradient as well. And of course you can change, if you have a gradient, you can click in here and change the color. Let's see, haven't been in here before, but so you can go in there and you can pick another color if you want a nice cool gradient, and then you can go OK. So you can see that changes things a little bit as well. So next we're going to go into sand. I'm going to go back to this picture here and take off this previous action, and I'm going to run sand. And sand is quite a muted action. It brightens, softens the tones, and then adds a color layer on top, which can be changed if you want. I just have a kind of a dusty color there, but you can change that if you like. And next we have Soft and Dreamy. This is a very popular action with a lot of people. So we run that. Sometimes it's a little bit heavy on RAM with using a lens blur like that. So you just have to make sure that you run this image on a large, you run this action on a large image, because if you run it on a web size image, the blur is going to be, it's just going to be too much. So you have to do it on a large high-res image. So this, obviously this needs editing. You have to edit with this action. We have a layer here called blurred and one called warm and muted. The warm and muted, it's just a matter of taste. You can knock that on or off. And then the blurred layer is just a lens blur, but you can paint on here just on the area with black, 100% opacity on the parts that you want in sharp focus. So I'm definitely going to do his hands and his face and eyes. So once I've done those bits, then I'm going to lower the opacity of my brush just a little and then paint. And so the other thing you can do is, if you want a very smooth gradient between blurred and not blurred. So I have it here, you can see the mask there, but let me just fill that in again. You can also use your gradient tool, and we have a radial gradient, and I'm going to set my gradient from black to transparent, and then you can use a gradient to start where you want the focus to be and drag it out to the edge, and that'll give you a nice smooth transition between sharp and blurred. So that's quite a nice way to do it as well. So next we're going to move on to soft newborn, and I'll show you how this works. What it does is take some of the contrast out of the, let's wait for it to run. Taking a little while. Okay, so it takes a little bit of contrast, adds a little bit there, but takes a little bit out of the center, so it raises the lights in the midtones. So You can see what that does, and then it adds a vignette. So this vignette, because the baby's quite close to the bottom here and the vignette is making it too dark just underneath here, I'm going to go onto my paintbrush, lower the opacity a little bit, click on the mask, making nice smooth, bring back some of that, so that vignette is not over her in any way, and then I can bring down the opacity of that as well. So that's that one, and that does seem to work best for newborns. So now we have soft tone, and I'm going to use that on this image now. So we have soft tone. Now this is nice on indoor or outdoor pictures, but again it just mutes the colors a little bit and then keeps it warm. So that's what that one does. Sunset, what one will I use this one on? I'll use it on this one here. So sunset, it actually works best on images that are a little bit cool to start off with, because it warms quite a lot, but you can see that it just brings nice warm tones to your picture. And with sunset, that has a radial gradient, so you can decide where you want the most peachy colours to be and where you want the darker one to be. So that's that. Again, you can decide on the opacity of these other layers, and then we're going to move on to a touch of gold, and I'm going to use it on this image here. So I'm going to run it. So so you can see what that does. It has pink and gold. So this gold one is quite it can be quite dark on an image. So what I would usually do with this is I would click on the mask of this layer, and with a black paintbrush paint off everything except the subject. I'm just painting around there. And you can lower or raise the opacity of that, and with the browns just play around with the opacity of these layers. But generally on the gold layer I would take off where it's been put on 100%, where it's affecting the background. But again, it depends on your picture, you might not want to. So for vintage, I'm going to use this image here, and it's just a simple vintage action, but it's also got a color layer as well to keep it warm, because sometimes without it, without those warm layers, the vintage can be a bit cool looking. So there's a warm, and then there's another one here which you can change the color of if you like. You can just choose a color and fill it in there like that, and you can change the opacity of that too. So nearly finished now. This is a warm haze action, and I'm going to use that on this one here. Again, it's quite a warm action, so you know, to start off with, his skin was quite cool, so just think about that when you run it. This is a warm one, then we have a bit of haze, and then we have brighten, so depending on your image you can play around with those. And on the warm, it can be good to click on your paintbrush, and on the mask of that you can just get the effect of that off the background, and just keep it on the subject only. But that's up to you. It depends if you like that effect on the background, that's also fine. And then the last action that we have here is the aubergine, and I like to use the aubergine, and I'm going to use this. This works good, works well on indoor and outdoor pictures. I'm just going to use it on an outdoor one here. So it's It's not too dramatic, but it just adds a little bit of vintage to the tones. This mutes the tones a little bit, and then but keeps contrast. And so at the moment this contrast is at 24%, but we can raise that up or lower it. And then the softened tones, that's just as it is. But you can click on the mask of that if you want to erase off that effect from certain areas. So those are the post-processing actions. That's the set for Elements.